Yeah, I'm showing 11:04, so just to keep conscious of everybody's time, and of course yours, will kick things off here. So thank you everybody again for joining us today. I'm Dan Prue, the General Manager of the Greater Vernon Chamber of Commerce. And always we hear from our members that HR is one of the top issues that they deal with and one of the challenges that they face in business. So really excited to bring some experts to help address some of those issues that our members are facing at the moment. So I'll just take a moment to introduce Pierre and Amanda from Peninsula Canada. So Amanda Brown is a partnerships manager, and Amanda has been with Peninsula Canada for just shy of 2 years. Her experience in management, customer experience, and business practice combined with Peninsula's winning platform and product allows her to reach business owners across Canada. Her goal is to guide these small and medium-sized businesses to make the most informed and educated decisions when it comes to HR and health and safety. And we also have with us Pierre Bourbonnais. I pronounced that right? Yeah.
Yep, you got it.
Originally from Montreal, Pierre has worked for over 25 years helping small and medium-sized businesses, both internationally and here in Canada, to create a successful and sustainable future. Currently with Peninsula Canada as an employment relations consultant, Pierre focuses on mitigating risk and building successful work environments for businesses and nonprofits. So thank you to both of you for your time and experience that you're going to share with us today. And I will leave it to you as the experts to carry on with the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. So I think what we wanted to do before we get started is just kind of get a sense of everybody on the call today. And we just want to know virtually how many employees does your business have? So I know we can put it in the chat box, but maybe let's start with this. If you want to raise your hand, if you've got between maybe 2 to 5 employees, you can raise your hand now and we can kind of get a good sense of how many people we've got on the call and how many employees you have. The next one that I would kind of suggest is maybe above that. So maybe 5 to 15 employees. So a little bit more of a roster. We know that what Pierre and I've experienced over the last couple of years working for Peninsula and then our experience elsewhere is that employees are often your biggest asset. They can also be a huge liability. So that's kind of where Peninsula and Pierre and I come in and just kind of helping you mitigate those risks and making sure that you're as prepared as possible. And then maybe perhaps a bunch of you are a part of businesses that have more than say 15 to 20 employees. Maybe you're in that 20 plus category. If you don't mind just putting it in the chat box, it just gives us a sense of where to direct the narrative and kind of the questions that we will ask as we continue the presentation. So thank you for doing that. We'll move on, and what we want to get to as well is and let you know that we are obviously basing all of our conversations on Canadian employment legislation, and today's presentation will be directed to British Columbia and the mandates and obviously legislation that's gone on in terms of COVID, more specifically in terms of the provincial legislation. But all in all, we generally do focus mostly on Canadian legislation. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pass it over to Pierre just to talk about Peninsula in more of a business case scenario and kind of how we've come to be and what we do from day to day.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes. So I know for many chamber members, we are a member of the chamber, obviously, and a partner with the chamber. Still, who is Peninsula? Where does Peninsula come from? So real basic rundown, this company started almost 40 years ago. 2 brothers, Peter and Fred, they had 6 employees. They actually caught someone stealing red-handed. So they terminated the employee for it. The employee came back with a claim against the business, which ended up costing them in today's money about $20,000 to the ex-employee, and then another $20,000 to the lawyer for representing them. So this is where Peter and Fred looked at each other and said, okay, we need to know what we're doing here. We need to know our rights as employers. We need to know our employees' rights. We need to be compliant, do things the right way. And we certainly need to protect ourselves from this kind of financial hit, so to speak, in the future. So that was the genesis of Peninsula as a company. This was in Manchester in the UK in the early 80s. We now have services in Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and since 2017 here in Canada. So in these past 3.5 years, we've actually become the #1 go-to for employers when it comes to HR and health and safety advice. And I think that has to do with the fact that we have nearly 40 years of experience behind us and roughly 80,000 clients worldwide. So that allows you as a client to tap into a wealth of knowledge and a pool of resources at any given time. And that's what we're here to do. Help you with your HR, help you with your OHS, and moving forward, should you wish to. So, voilà. Back to you, Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you, Pierre. So what I'll do is you'll notice throughout the presentation, I'm not really a read off of the screen type of gal. So if I miss anything that's on the screen, it's just because I'm assuming that you are maybe digesting it by visually reading it, but we'll just go over the agenda. What we want to talk about is really how we can, obviously in this time, prepare ourselves as a business owner, as an employer, to ensure that we are A, compliant, B, prepared, and C, just feeling confident in the backup that you have. So we'll go over a couple of things. We are going to talk a little bit about COVID and its implications, because it's obviously very important. It has changed the landscape for businesses in general, not only large, but small and medium size especially. It's been a struggle this past year, and we know that and we recognize that, and that's kind of why we're here. We're going to talk a little bit about the vaccine rollout and what that looks like, and kind of how you're to handle that as an employer and how you're to handle it with your employees. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about, more broadly, just what that encompasses. So what that looks like in terms of protection for your business and how you need to feel supported, and all of the items that come and go with that. We could talk about probably each slide that we show, we could probably talk about it for an hour itself. But we're here to just kind of give you a bigger overview. And please, if at any time you have any questions, place them into the chat box. I'm going to do my best right now to get through the presentation first, and then we'll kind of redirect, and Pierre and I will come back and answer the questions that you have. So we'll move into the COVID updates for British Columbia. We received these updates this morning, so I've made sure that they're up to date. Really good numbers here, and we're not going to be here to tell you what our personal opinions are on the vaccine. What we're here to tell you is what we think you should do as a business owner. So what will make your life easier and more compliant. So great number, 47% of adults have had at least one dose of the vaccine, which is a fantastic number, especially considering, unfortunately, everybody's had to shift all their vaccines over to Ontario to solve our problems over here. So appreciate you guys over in BC lending us a hand. And it's been open to all adults 18 plus for quite a while. I think it's now been a week or so over. But this is the time and place where, if you are able to encourage your employees to go get the vaccine, we'll talk about ways to do that in a little while. In regards to protected paid leave to get the vaccine, that's something that's come out where you are able to give those 3 hours that your employees are able to go and get the vaccine. It's a great way to encourage people to do it. And I know things that we've done here and ways that we've encouraged it. I know our CEO kind of keeps us up to date all the time. He updated us when he got his own vaccine, gave us some solutions for finding vaccines, because it was pretty tough in a lot of provinces, really, to source ways to get the vaccine. So then next, what we do want to talk about is obviously the restrictions that you'll see. So they're updated until May 24th. Across the country, we've kind of seen that trend, and that's, I think, just to encompass and incorporate the long weekend and make sure that we don't have some crazy hike in cases over the long weekend, and make sure that we can mandate appropriate social distancing and activities and things like that. And then lastly but not least, I know for us Ontarians, it was released and passed in terms of the 3 paid sick days in regards to COVID symptoms only. This legislation has not been officially passed in BC, but it is near 100% likely to pass within the coming days. So what we'll talk about, and we'll talk about this again a little bit later, but what that means essentially is that if you have an employee, and this is applicable only to businesses who do not already have paid sick leave policies. So a lot of questions that we've received, and I might answer some questions, is I already pay my staff, I already give my staff 4 paid sick days. can I give them then, can I top it up and then give them 7 or 8? No is essentially the answer. This is only for businesses who do not already offer paid sick leave, and it is only for COVID related symptoms. So whether they get the vaccine and they have symptoms or they actually come down with COVID. So if you have any questions on that, please put them into the chat and we'll try and answer them as best as possible. And we'll move on. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about health and safety first, and then we'll move into the HR components, and Pierre will finish off with a little bit more of those digestible documents and things like that to kind of get your brain working on what you might be missing. But when we talk about compliance in 2021, we're here in this crazy world and we're adapting as we go, and things are constantly changing. What we do often find with business owners is the question of, in regards to any visitations, what do those look like? So inspections are happening more and more frequently. They have increased capacity to perform these inspections across the country. And this is just to ensure that they're keeping people safe and they're keeping you safe as an employer, keeping your employees safe, and just giving peace of mind to everybody in general. If you've been inspected before, you might know what that protocol looks like. You might know what it feels like. Oftentimes, they're not coming in to barge into your business and shut you down right away. They really want to work with you and making sure that you're being compliant. However, it is a really good idea to have all your ducks in a row before they visit you. So there are 4 types of inspections that you should always be ready for. The first is announced, where it's an informed visitation and you know about it ahead of time. Second is also unannounced, which is uninformed. You don't have any idea. They can come in, and it's really recommended by everybody at Peninsula, and I'm sure anybody else involved in employment, but to work alongside these people, to not shut them out and say, no, you can't come in. They can come in. They have every right to, and it's suggested that you work with them as best as possible. Then you have your complaints. So if somebody, and it could be a neighboring business, it could be somebody, perhaps a customer, it could be an employee, it could be really anybody that makes a complaint in regards to your business and how you're operating for your health and safety compliance, and they can then come in and inspect on those grounds. And lastly is sectional. So obviously many businesses have been open and closed and open and closed, at least in Ontario. I know I'm definitely self-deprecating today in terms of my Ontario affiliation, but that ebb and flow of open and closing is informing, a lot of the decisions that these bodies and these governing bodies make. So they will generally announce this. So Ministry of Labor, other governing bodies will kind of have these announcements laid out on their public portals or on the online. And they'll say, well, we're choosing this section, we're choosing this industry, we're choosing this area. And that will sort of inform you as a business owner. Perhaps you are in either that area or you're in that industry, and that's kind of where you would be encapsulated within those visitations. So as we move on, this just dives into a little bit more about the COVID must-haves for compliance, and without sounding like a broken record, talking about all the different types of PPE and discussing what's better, 2 masks, 1 mask, whatever it may be. What we need to know is all of the items that are on this list and many more you need to be taking advantage of, and you need to be addressing if you can. So obviously sanitization, reporting of illnesses. So ensuring that you're checking your staff as they come in, if they are essential, if you do need to have them in office. We will talk a little bit about remote working and what that looks like, knowing that it's not possible for every business to work remotely and operate remotely. Physical distancing, screening measures, staggered shifts, scheduling. We've had a lot of questions and we've hosted a lot of events lately in regards to the vaccine and discussing the implications of the vaccine. In reality, we can't depend solely on the vaccine. What we know is that obviously it's definitely has its scientific benefits to curb the spread of the virus. However, it's basically like saying, okay, well, I got the flu shot, I don't need to wash my hands anymore. You still need to wash your hands. You still need to be socially distanced appropriately, and you still need to make sure that you're engaging in all of these types of protocols within your business. And this will actually support you as you move back into operation, whether or not you stopped fully or you're going to be inviting more staff in, recalling more staff. There's a possibility that if you don't have all of this outlined, that staff can actually come into your business operation and say that and essentially say, I don't feel safe working here. I don't feel comfortable. And they have every right to refuse unsafe work. And this is included in that. So just make sure that you're taking that into consideration. So safety training, this is a big one. There are different types of training that each industry needs. Obviously, there are types of mandated training that people need, but there are most basic trainings that staff need to be aware of and that they need to have completed. So in regards to the safety training, as I click back, I'll just go back here for you. See, I'm not even used to technology yet. I warmed up too hard this morning. My fingers are too limber. I'm getting a little crazy. So basically, when you want to take a look into what the health and safety trainings look like for your industry and for your business. So again, I'm not going to get into all of them. They are very different for each industry and for each type of business, but make sure that you're abreast of those types of trainings and ensure that you are tailoring it to your workplace. So can you provide this training remotely? Great, let's do it. You want to make sure that you're keeping records of this. So I know for myself, it feels like ages ago, but there was some training that I did when I first started with Peninsula, and I've done it with every new job that I've been fortunate enough to have. And I did my training, and I had to take a screenshot of the certificate, and I sent it to my boss at the time. And he stored it on our internal system, which up here we'll have a little bit of time to talk about at the end, called Bright HR. So that's just a way of tracking both training certificates and any other HR documents and any other documentation really that you have across the business, like anything else. And like Pierre, and I'm sure lots of people have mentioned to business owners, is if it's not documented, it didn't happen. If you speak to lawyers, if there's an issue, that's kind of the answer. And Pierre, I'm sure you come in contact with some issues like that.
We do. I see this constantly every day. There was and where again, if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. And this doesn't have to do necessarily with safety training, but there was a company not too long ago I spoke to where they had someone that was not performing, and they decided to terminate that person for non-performance. And then that person came back with a claim against the business, a human rights claim for discrimination because they were transgender, which the company had no knowledge of. But they didn't have anything in place. They had nothing documented to why they had been there was performance issues. So they were now facing a human rights claim because of it, for not having things written down, not having things in place. Back to safety training also, there's been, I'm not sure the exact number, but there's been something like over 30 changes in OHS occupational health and safety standards in the last year alone. So it's almost something you have to be on top of all the time, unfortunately. Yeah. But that's also where we come in as well, and I'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think what we've all come to realize in the last year is we really don't know anything in terms of how things will continue to evolve and change. All that we know is that they will evolve and change. So being able to stay on top of it, or being able to have a resource to manage that, is definitely something that you should look at taking advantage of. So again, I won't go through all this. Pierre just mentioned a really good point in regards to updating with recent legislative changes, and then the idea that training is a long-term investment. We're obviously here to talk to you about being an employer, but at some point, or if still, we're all employees in nature. So we know that safety is important. We know that feeling safe is important. I joked the other day, I'm like, I don't care if they gave me saline as part of my vaccine. I feel a little bit better, so I'm a little bit happier. And I mean, I'm hoping that I didn't get saline for my vaccine. But if you're encouraging people, and if you're encouraging your employees and making them feel safe and supported in a way that also supports you and ensures that you're safe from a legal point of view and perspective, everybody can just, it just becomes a little bit more malleable in nature. You're able to just ebb and flow easier. People are more comfortable. And at the end of the day, if people feel supported, they work harder. And if they work harder, you probably will make more money. And if you make more money, you'll be more successful in terms of finance. But you'll also just be able to manage your staff better, and it won't be as much of a tug and like pull, right? So just keep that in mind. So moving on, we just do want to ask everybody, we'll move on to the HR side of things shortly, but we want to kind of touch base and see, get a pulse rating of when was the last time essentially you've had your contracts updated? So you can let us know in the chat if you feel comfortable. If not, you can raise your hand. So maybe perhaps in the last year, if you've updated your employment contracts, you can raise your hand. Perhaps it was recently, so perhaps it's been within the last like 3 months-ish. Feel free to raise your hand. Or maybe it was a while ago, maybe it's pre-COVID. That's the last time that you've updated your employment contracts. If that is the case, not to worry. I definitely would stay on it and maybe have a conversation with Pierre after the fact, and we can just discuss how we can help you adjust those contracts and make sure that you're all set to go. But time is money when you own a business, and I think everybody knows that. Even when you don't own a business, time is money. I don't own a business, but I know that time is money, and you want to be able to save yourself these headaches. Think about all the time that you have to spend on a document, and then how often you have to update it. And that could be taking away from things like if you own a restaurant, you're talking about your bottom line and figuring out new menus and making sure that you're COVID compliant and all of these things that really take precedence, which often, especially pre-COVID, is why the HR and health and safety, unless mandated by like food safety rules or whatever it might be, fell to the wayside. And then when it does fall to the wayside, you run into problems like Pierre just discussed. So it's really important that you stay on top of it. So now we'll get into the HR part, which that's another positive, I guess, with COVID, is it's made HR more exciting. If it hasn't been top of mind, it sure is now. So it's a really good position to have, especially for Pierre and I, because you fight for like, this is important, and then an unfortunate circumstance comes up and people realize just how important it is. So remote employees, and I know Pierre's got some examples of this situation later, but essentially what we want to talk about here is that if you can, in any capacity, and it's not detrimental to your business can run the same and as effectively. Perhaps you found ways and reasons to do it in the last little while. You should be having your employees work remotely. There are plenty of benefits, obviously. Overhead costs are certainly a consideration if you're renting office space, safety, and work-life balance for some employees. I know sometimes it's very easy also as an employee myself to like, oh my goodness, it's 9 o'clock and I'm still at my desk because my desk is only 5 meters from my couch. But there are lots of benefits, and it really is the best way to kind of really make sure that you're keeping your staff safe and you're supporting the world as it is right now for your employees. So obviously communication is key, outlining, and Pierre will probably talk about this when we talk about contracts more so and things like that, but you need to make sure that you come to an agreement with your employees. So being flexible is fantastic. It's a great position to be in with your employees. It makes them, again, feel supported. It makes them feel like they have a little bit more balance, but you need to make those conversations clear, and that supports both you and the employee. So if it's that you're moving into maybe thinking about doing a more hybrid model where you have people come in and out, you need to make sure that you're outlining that and documenting that outline and making sure that it's labeled within your contracts and policies, or your policies, mind you, so that you can actually enforce the conversations that you've had. And then you want to go into set work hours. So like anything else, you want to be able to make sure that that balance is created appropriately and properly. We talk about flexibility a lot because I know, especially, and I'm not sure, actually, Pierre, if you don't mind, the schooling situation, is everybody in school in BC, or are some schools closed?
So, well, school will be closing shortly because in next
Fair enough.
Summer's coming up. But there was some schools were open. Some of the daycares still weren't open. So again, there's that issue with if there's a child who had COVID, so now they asked the entire class to stay home for a couple of weeks and such. So it just, it's pretty dependent. Just to touch on this point, if you don't mind, Amanda, one of the things that I've seen a lot in several cases of at least, where speaking about remote employees, COVID has really made us a lot of, like you said, business. Okay, we got to work from home now. We got to do this. We got to do that. So I spoke to, this is just one example of a company I spoke to not too long ago, where they had allowed the employees to work from home. And it wasn't even COVID related. They just said, oh, you know what, for the next, sure, go ahead. Let's just work from home. But then as things started opening up again, they decided, okay, we need to bring everybody back because, we're much more productive when we're working together as a team. Mm-hmm. And two of the employees refused. They said, no, we don't want to come back. We're perfectly fine working from home, and we can do our jobs working from home. So then came this, the employer's like, well, no, but your place of work is here. This is where we all started, and we need you back. Now, the issue at this particular situation was that they didn't have an employment contract in place to begin with. Right. So I noticed that there's a couple of comments that, yes, there's employment contracts. Some are looking to make changes to. Most businesses that I've run into, you're still running on verbal agreements like we did when I was a kid, right? So what happened is that since they didn't have it laid out, they didn't have a policy about remote work. How long would it be? It was temporary, would be, they had nothing in writing about any of this. So when the employer demanded that they return, they put in a constructive dismissal claim as they were forcing them to change their workplace. And
quite often.
Now we've got lawyer fees. Now we got to deal with lawyers. We got to deal with this. We got to deal with that. Whereas if we'd had a policy in place to begin with, if we had in a contract that would allow or disallow, depending on your, as how your business runs, it would be much more manageable, right? Instead of all of a sudden now we're looking at wrongful dismissal claims and lawyer fees and all this. It's small business, 6 employees, so it doesn't take much,
Yeah, 2 of 6.
Having things in place just really sets the tone and protects the business interest and the interest of everyone involved, right?
Yeah, and it also lets, hopefully we're all going to be in a position in terms of business owners soon where you're bringing people back, or perhaps you've had to let people go and you need to rehire people. And if you start off on the right foot where everything is clear, concise, laid out, you can also, to a certain degree, weed out maybe people who don't fit into your company culture. There might be people who could not be effective working in an office. I know I personally miss the office because I'm a social person, so I like being able to bounce ideas off of other people and be around people, and the terrible coffee in the kitchen and things like that. I miss that. But I think having that set up from the beginning in a place where we're in this downtime right now, so to be able to adjust things and really make sure that you're prepared to move forward. And then once we all move forward, I mean, there's only so far you can go down. At some point, we're going to go back up, and we've seen it in history time and time again in terms of these types of crises. So just being prepared is really, really important. And that's something that we're kind of going to get into now. So we'll talk a little bit about updating those contracts and handbooks. So it is a laboring experience, to put it lightly. There are people that we have within our business, within Peninsula, that do this for their day in and day out job, and they find a way to love it. It's not my thing, and it probably isn't why you started your business. So at the end of the day, you don't get into owning a retail store, a clothing retail store, because you love writing paper, like writing papers or updating contracts or writing policies. You probably did it because you have a passion for fashion, or you have a passion for food, that's why you opened a restaurant, or perhaps you saw a need in an industry that you were involved in and you wanted to deliver on that need. For the most part, unless you're likely either working for Peninsula or you got into law, you're probably not that keen on doing this stuff, and nor do you have the experience, which is again something that I don't have, that Pierre doesn't necessarily have, but we have people that have that experience. That makes it easy to digest in a way. So these are just a few of, and I won't read all of these. Hopefully we'll need those travel policies soon enough. We'll get there eventually, but things like timekeeping and the vaccine policy is really, really important to discuss, and we can talk about some questions that you have on that, but making sure that all of these policies are updated within your contracts and handbooks. And maybe Pierre, if you want to give the kind of a good example of the difference between perhaps a contract and a handbook, that's probably a good way to start.
Yeah, we do see that a lot of times, like when I'm speaking with employers, where they say, well, we have an offer letter, and in that it speaks to, you know, some of the policies and things that we have. So a lot of times we kind of meld or mesh these two documents together, but actually they are two separate documents. The contract is that defines that employment relationship. In other words, if I come to work for you, this is what the company is offering me, right? Which is my position and where I'm going to be working and how much am I making and how vacation is accrued and how it's paid out. And it's kind of very specific, a lot of specifics around a termination clause. What would that look like should the day come when we have to part ways? We're going to have the temporary layoff clause. Something pre-COVID was, people would say, why would I have that? Enter COVID. Now we know why that, you know, it turns out if you do lay somebody off without a contract or a clause that allows you to do so, or you don't allow your employee doesn't actually sign off and agree to it in writing, then we're looking at a constructive dismissal claim. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of constructive dismissal claims happening right now here in BC for that very reason. So the contract really is going to speak to what the company is offering me. The handbook is going to speak to what the company is expecting from me, right? So if we're investing $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 a year in someone, you're going to have clauses in, you know, how you expect that return on that investment, and that's where the handbook comes in. So there's a lot of policies that government mandates that you have in place, and then there's the policies that you want to have in place, how you expect your business to run, and how you expect your employees to behave, how you roll as a company. This is the handbook helps to build the corporate culture, business culture that you want to create. And it eliminates a lot of the gray areas, I didn't know that, or well, you never told me that, or well, you didn't tell Jim that. And then, you know, that's when we start having issues. So having a proper handbook, a proper employment contract, which will speak to the handbook. Again, it lays out the rules, the regulations, transparency, and it eliminates the surprises that could happen later on.
Great. So one question that we've obviously talked a lot about, that is going to get interesting if it keeps sliding across there. Anyways, we'll skip past that. That's probably going to be distracting. At least it was distracting for me. So when the vaccine policy is something that has come up consistently in kind of any event we've hosted, multiple conversations. It comes up on our marketing platforms, on our social media quite often. And basically it's because I think there's a bit of, people are unsure really about what you can do about the vaccine. Can you ask people to get vaccinated? Can you force people to get vaccinated? What happens if somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated, but they need to come back into the office? These are the questions that we're receiving quite often. And there is a fair amount of gray area, unfortunately. I think what happens when policies and when issues come into play in the middle of a pandemic, we rush to get these things covered and say, okay, well, we'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis as these things come up. So what we will say as well is that it's also different depending on your business. So you'll notice if you work in childcare, the likelihood of you being able to mandate vaccinated employees is probably higher than if you own a retail store. And the reason being is it's just very different in nature. I know I worked personally in childcare early on, way back in the day. Not really childcare. I worked for Chuck E. Cheese when I was younger, so that was interesting. I don't know what kind of vaccination they have for that place, but they should come out for one for that place. But so you have that, and then I worked within childcare within some non-for-profits that dealt with childcare, and the reality is we were having to ask employees for vaccinations that otherwise we probably wouldn't have had to ask for. But because they're dealing with children, it's very, very different. A lot of childcare facilities won't actually take children if they are not vaccinated. And again, this is not an opinion on what we think about vaccinations or if they work or if people should get vaccinated or what they do to people. It's more so what the policy should be surrounding these vaccines so that you as business owners are protected. So you'll see here on the note your stance on employees getting the vaccine. We do suggest it. And again, you don't have to take a stance in terms of your personal opinion, but in terms of covering off all those items that we talked about in terms of COVID implications and health and safety measures and things like that, this would be considered one of those measures. Again, as mentioned before, it should not be considered the be all and end all measure. Unfortunately, it's not like once someone gets vaccinated, the world is solved. Once we get to a place where CDC says, listen, we think that the pandemic is over. Now we might downgrade it. Maybe it's downgraded to something else, who knows? But until then, you need to make sure that the vaccine is a part of your health and safety and HR program, but not something that you rely on. So your obligations under health and safety legislation, again, time off for the vaccine. So I know some businesses are offering a full day. If you want to do that, you can. If you don't have to. You have to also think about what I think. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, so I come from a place where I understand the onus on the business owner and really sometimes the lack of protection that business owners feel. And we're empathetic with you guys for sure. I certainly am. I know Pierre is, and I know most of the people that work even outside of Peninsula, but all of the people that work inside Peninsula are sensitive to these needs and the holes that you guys need to fill as employers. So the reality is you have to make sure that it works for your business. No one's going to force you. If no one's going to force you to give 5 paid days off to every employee to go and get the vaccine, and no one's expecting you to do that. If you can provide those 3 hours, great. If you can organize your schedule, if you have an influx of staff coming in and out, and you can organize the schedule in a way where you have those 3 hours allotted for each, either before or after their shift, whatever it might be. But due diligence is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about uprooting your entire business plan just to solve a problem of your employee getting vaccinated. So keep that in mind. Then record keeping of vaccines. So Pierre will talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of what Peninsula can provide for that, but making sure that we're keeping record of them. A lot of questions have come up, and again, on the Ontario webinar that we did today, which was focused a lot on vaccines, was, can you ask if your employees have been vaccinated? Yes, you can ask them. Do they have to give you a response? No. They don't have to tell you. They don't have to say yes or no. For the most part, we're seeing that the majority of people are willing to get the vaccine, want to get the vaccine, and are actually, in fact, proud when they do get the vaccine. So that's I think from our standpoint, that's what we're seeing. But there are going to be those employees that maybe can't for health reasons or perhaps religious reasons. And if you try to impose on those reasons and actually really impose on someone's decision on their body autonomy in general, it can be taken as a human rights issue. And then when you get into human rights, it becomes a whole other thing that you really, I mean, Pierre, I'm sure you've had this conversation with plenty of business owners.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Human rights claims, we're seeing them left, right, and center right now. Happening, and not just around COVID, but just in general. But absolutely, it would be a violation of the Privacy Act, to demand that kind of information and to impose that. Yes, you're looking at a human rights claim, and that's 5, 6 digit, well, maybe not 6, but definitely 5-digit figure lawsuits. So yeah. So again, this is something, and please feel free to take, I know Pierre is more than happy to sit down with each and every one of you and go through any specific questions that you have in regards to our business. We had some questions today.
everybody at my in my business is vaccinated except for our receptionist, and she refuses to get the vaccine. What can I do? Those are case by case, and those need to be handled very, very, very diligently and delicately. And we can kind of help you essentially guide those conversations and help you have them so that you are protected, and really so that the overall I want to say vibe, but the overall culture in the office doesn't become this like wave of, oh my God, Susan refuses to get the vaccine. And then you get into perhaps bullying issues, and that you can be held accountable for as well. And you want to be in control of that. So there's so many things that go into this. It's a touchy subject for everybody. Everybody is kind of at this place, whether or not they want the vaccine, where they're just at a wit's end. So it's just something to be careful of. And I apologize, I spent too much time on this, but we have gotten a lot of questions on it, and I'm pretty passionate about making sure that business owners feel protected, because I know in a lot of cases, and we're pretty much standalone in terms of Canada in general, the rights that employees have over employers. So it's very important to make sure that you're on top of that so that you are protected.
That's right.
So I think, Pierre, I'm going to hand it off to you to discuss a little bit about updating those handbooks and contracts and all the fun stuff, and then we'll get into a couple other things after, and then we'll get into Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Yes, absolutely. So updating a handbook, what does that look like? What are we supposed to have in a handbook? Well, there's a number of policies. Like I mentioned earlier, there's about 13 different types of leave that are protected here in BC. So we want to make sure that we have all of those in our handbook. This, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to set the expectations for new hires. People are going to know exactly what's expected of them when they come to work for you. One of the new types of leaves that came out not too long ago, and this is just prior to the COVID leave, is the sexual and domestic violence leave. So this was approved in May of 2019, where should an employee, God forbid, suffer sexual or domestic violence, they are now allowed between 10 days and 15 weeks of job protected leave. So this can throw if you're a small business, this can really throw a monkey wrench into how you operate. I mean, obviously you're going to support your employee to the best of your ability in this. As of August last year, the first 5 days are now payable, and this is on employers as well. So these are changes that do happen actually. And obviously we have the new COVID leave changes that have come in this year as well. Government does change things around more often than we think. And they don't necessarily send you an email saying, hey, guess what? We came up with something to make your life more interesting. Right? It's on you. The onus is always going to be on employers to be aware of these things and to implement those kind of changes. So again, and I'll get into that later, this is where we can help you with that. Updating your contracts, another thing that we want to do. If you don't have a contract, you want to get a contract in place. This, as I said earlier, this is the foundational piece to your employment agreement and your relationship with your employees. This is going to help resolve disputes in the future. Again, in collaboration with the handbook, will outline the responsibilities. Handbook on the employee, the contract also on the employer. And it makes expectations very, very clear. So if you do any changes that are made to a contract, or if you're bringing in a contract, this is a question I get all the time. Well, we've had our employees now for 10 years. Can we bring in a contract now? I mean, can we do that? Absolutely. It absolutely can be done, and it's in everyone's best interest to have it done. Mm-hmm. There's ways of implementing that, and we can help you with that as well. But definitely both parties have to agree and have to sign off on it. So here some of the policies that we want to put in place to mitigate risks in the workplace. We've discussed a little bit about vaccine policy, sickness policy, the right of search. That's an interesting one. Can we, how far can we go into looking into somebody's things, right? If we suspect an employee has stolen something, maybe someone did something they shouldn't have. We caught it on camera because we had a CCTV camera in the building. Well, if we don't have a policy around the use of CCTV cameras, then any footage that we might see would not be, we wouldn't be able to use that. because again, this would be a violation of the Privacy Act. So we actually need to have a policy in place that's going to speak to why we have CCTV cameras, what they're there for, and that employees understand and they sign off that they understand on this. Otherwise, it wouldn't be valid. So I actually spoke to a business not too long ago where they not only had CCTV cameras in the store, but they actually had one right on top of the secretary, and they had the mics on. Yes. So this is a criminal case.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at criminal charges now because this is just outright spying, and is totally illegal. Thank God they didn't know, because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. So, okay, yeah. No, if you can't do that, that's a very dangerous thing to do. Okay, we got their policies changed and updated. Mental health, huge issue right now. With this pandemic, we see domestic violence has gone up about 45%. Addictions are shooting through the roof. People don't know how to cope. We're not just seeing bullying from employees to employees. We're seeing bullying from employees onto employers.
Mm-hmm.
I actually spoke with someone not too long ago, an employer who in tears was telling me how this employee who's been with them for years and she trusted was verbally abusing her. And again, no policies in place around mental health, what to do, how to deal with it. She didn't know, which is why she contacted us. So these are just some of the policies that you want to have in place. Obviously, you want a drug and alcohol policy. The last thing you want is, take a specific example. One of our clients had an employee who was just wasn't effective in the workplace, and they were thinking of letting him go. They use our software called Blip, which is a time tracking clock in, clock out system. And they ran a report one day and discovered that this person had been clocking out 20 minutes early every Wednesday. And they were like, oh, okay, well, that's odd. So they called our advice team. What do we do here? We've got this situation. We're not really sure why this is happening. Okay, well, we need to start an investigation, find out. In that investigation, we discovered that this employee was actually going to Narcotics Anonymous. Wow. This company had been seriously considering letting this person go. Mm-hmm. Well, what do they call that? There's a name for it. A substance addiction discrimination. That's what it is. So an addiction discrimination lawsuit can run you between $20,000 and $800,000. Had they fired this person, not knowing what was happening, he could have come back with a claim saying, well, I'm an addict and they fired me for it. They discovered he was going to Narcotics Anonymous. Okay, how can we accommodate? Well, they've changed his schedule around, gave him actually a full half hour on Wednesday so he could go to his sessions. Worked out the schedule, he made up for it elsewhere. Within a year, not only did this employee get cleaned up, he actually became one of the star performers of the company. So these are just some of the things that, again, reasons why you want to have these in place, mitigates the risk to you, and it also helps to build the team that you're having, right? Penalties for violating employment standards and the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Well, there are huge costs. A lot of times just having to take things to or go to court over something can have huge financial impact on your business. There's the time that is lost. There's the headache. There's it can ruin relations within the business. So the morale, oh, this person's doing this, they're coming back at the company. Obviously, there's the public opinion aspect of it. Should things go, it goes out or is known around. It was a coffee shop here in Vancouver that had a situation like that last year, where the employees actually came out on social media and just denouncing the employer for harassment. And he had to actually like sell off his shares of the business and walk away and public apology for it. From a publicity, it ruined the reputation of the business as much as they tried to salvage it. Financially, it was a huge hit as well. So and then of course there's also the reporting to other statutory bodies in these things. Anti-bullying and harassment policy. I spoke to a business in Quesnel not too long ago. Mom and pop shop, 3 people, mother, father, and daughter. Well, they got a harassment claim from a client. WorkSafe sent up someone to investigate. So where's your anti-bullying and harassment policy? What's that? Oh, okay, $2,500 fine right off the bat. They did the investigation, discovered there had been no harassment, but they still had to pay the fine just because they didn't have that policy in place. So it's worth putting in place, not just because of the financial aspect of how that might affect you, but it's about building. You know, if you're in business, you're there for a reason. Like Amanda said earlier, it's either it's because of your passion, or you're there because you're going to make money, you're going to offer a service nobody has. The last thing you need is a claim or something coming in because you forgot to put in a policy around it that can take a nice chunk out of your wallet at the end of the day.
Great, thanks, Pierre.
So protecting your business, there's 4 ways that we support our clients. So businesses like yours, like yourselves as well. The first side is the documentation aspect of it. We create the employment contracts that you need. The idea of this is that they be impermeable. They have all 17 plus clauses that need to be in there. They're going to speak to every I is dotted, every T is crossed. This is something that we guarantee. Handbooks. We want to create that handbook. We're going to create that with you. We're going to schedule in with an HR expert. So we have 40 HR experts that work with us across the country. So we schedule you in with them to create that handbook to reflect your business, make sure that it's compliant above all, and that those policies are upholdable. The next service that we bring is a 24-hour advice team. So this is where we have people working with us. Like I said, you have CPHRs and health and safety specialists on call 24/7. You know, Amanda, when I first started working here, I asked myself 24/7, who's going to call at 11 o'clock at night? This is when people call. I've been amazed by it, you know, because they're, you know, trying to get some sleep, thinking, oh God, I got to talk to Pete for the umpteenth time tomorrow. I just don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Call. You're talking to a specialist. You're talking to a pro. They're going to give you options available to you. You're going to get a summary of that conversation in the morning. You're going to have documentation that you need. You need a letter of expectation. We'll create that. Do you need a, you know, do you need a performance review? We can do that as well. We do have software, Bright HR, which Amanda alluded to earlier. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about it, but Bright HR is designed to help streamline operations within the business. Most importantly, has unlimited file storage and document and record keeping for the business, as well as the platform we use to push out documentation. And in all that is scheduling, planning, shifts, clock in, clock out, expensing, mileage. There's even a module called VacTrack, so we can know who's vaccinated, who isn't, or where they're at in their vaccination process. From the health and safety side, we're looking at your risk assessments. There's e-learning courses, all with certifications, hazard reporting that employees can do right from their phones, generates reports. Once those are taken care of, it generates another report. And then when you do get a health and safety investigation, well, here we go. This is what we do. This is how we done. This is how we operate. And you're in full compliance with WorkSafe and Ministry of Labor as well. And then Peninsula Protect, real briefly, this is something unique. I've yet to see anyone else in Canada do this, but if as a client, you were to get a constructive or wrongful dismissal claim, or perhaps a human rights claim, so discrimination or harassment, or a health and safety investigation, Peninsula Protect kicks in there. So we actually will walk you through any enforcement actions. We'll provide expert legal representation, and the business will be covered against legal costs for up to $500,000 a year. So again, it's something unique. I've yet to see anyone else do this. I know a lawyer will more than gladly do it for you, but it's going to cost a pretty penny.
Yeah. Agreed. Thank you, Pierre. That's awesome. So I think that I know, in fact, that brings us to the end of our formal presentation. I know that there our questions, and forgive me, I haven't been looking at the chat. It distracts me. So here we go. And then I know, Dan, you said that you were going to be able to kind of facilitate the questions, and hopefully Pierre and I can answer all of them. And if not, we'll find someone who can.
Yeah, you betcha. So yeah, here's your opportunity. If you have any further questions based on the presentation, or maybe something else that you've been thinking of keeping you up at night, HR related, now's a good time to ask it. So I did see a couple come in here. I'll read the first one. So with the 3 days from the government, I assume this is related to the paid leave for COVID-related reasons. So it looks like it says companies eligible are those that do not have a sick day policy. Would new staff that have not passed probation and so not eligible for sick days yet be eligible? Or if they've used their 5 days by our program, could they then be eligible for additional days once they have used up their 5 committed by our company?
So that's a good question. And just to confirm, it would be outside of, if you have a paid sick leave policy, this generally doesn't apply to you. I would want to confirm that for everybody though, because again, there are so many gray areas. But what we're seeing is I can answer the question in regards to if you do not have this policy. If you do not have a sick leave policy, paid sick leave policy, that is, it will be eligible. They'll be eligible for those 3 days, regardless of when they began. So if they started yesterday and they fall sick tomorrow, they would be eligible for that paid sick leave. Now, in regards to, that's a good question. I haven't had that question come up in regards to, we already have a paid sick leave policy for 5 days. However, that paid sick leave policy kicks in for when the employee has reached or has passed their probation. It's a good question. I'll find the answer for that, and we can definitely get back to you on that, either Pierre or I. Pierre, do you have any insight onto that in that specific answer?
So my first question, before even coming to that, my first question would be, does the company have a probationary period policy? Because it turns out that if we don't have that actually written into a contract, that the first 90 days or 3 months you're on probation, they are employees from day one. So that would be the first step to look at. If you don't have this in writing, then while you you might say, well, after 90 days, if it's verbal, if you say, well, after 90 days, you get, you're able to tap into that, into our sick day policy. Again, if this is not in writing, then they would technically, as far as the law would look at it, they would be your employees from day one and would then be eligible. So just something to, that would be my take on it would be, first of all, let's see, what does the contract say? Does the contract say we have a 90-day probationary period? Okay, so they don't have access to it. Again, I'm not an employment lawyer and I don't work for the government. I would think that because they are non-eligible, because of that policy that you have specifically written, they should be able to tap in. But I would let Amanda kind of find that out for sure, or I can look into it as well. And we can certainly get back. Unfortunately, it says anonymous attendee, so I won't know who to get back in touch with on this one, but I'd be more than happy to find that out for you.
Yeah, so Dan, if you don't mind, Claire, I'm taking a look at the chat here just to see if I can find that. But if you can give us the name of whoever has the question, we'll find the answer.
Yeah, they'll have to confirm with me because I can't see either.
Okay, fair
if
enough.
you want to do that privately, you can send me a private message to let me know who you are if you didn't want the entire group to know that was you asking. And just to confirm, if they've already used up 5 days in the policy, can they use the other 3 for COVID-related purposes, or? That's it. Great. Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying.
I would imagine that, so again, to confirm, I know the Ontario policy, which I believe all of the other policies are kind of being built around. You're not eligible. So either you have it or you just, so you can't double up essentially on policies. You can't kind of pick from both baskets, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes sense. We have another question from Josh. So do we need to pay employees something in order for them to sign off on a new employment agreement to make it more of a contract?
Good question. Pierre, you might want to take this one. I'll give my opinion, so to speak, and what we kind of suggest. It is suggested that if you're asking anybody to sign off on something new, that there is some sort of reciprocity, so to speak. But Pierre, anything that you have in terms of opinions on that?
Yes. So there's, I'm going to use my new catchphrase. There's many ways to cook a potato.
I like that.
I used to say there's many ways to skin a cat, and somebody's got offended. So I don't say that anymore. Yes, you should always, so let's take an example that you've had an employee who's been with you for 3 or 4 years, X amount of time, and you're asking them to sign off on a new employment contract, then yes, you would definitely want to bring something in exchange for that. So it could be if you're considering doing a raise, if you're considering giving a bonus at the end of the year, or just an extra day or two of holidays, or there's different ways of doing it, but you would definitely want to do something in exchange for. Absolutely. Unless the employee just refuses, in which case we can move to working notice.
Right. Okay, thanks. Question here. So, yeah, that was who asked the previous question anonymously. So I can reach out to you with more information. Question from Verna. Is in the employee handbook and an amendment added to the agreement when applicable? Okay, I think she was just maybe making a comment. Janet is asking if this recording will be available later. Yes, of course it will be. Yes. We'll share it with you and post it on our YouTube page.
And if you can see Pierre's, I think if you can see Pierre's name clearly, if you do have any immediate concerns, please definitely feel free. His email is essentially first name dot last name at peninsula-ca.com. Perfect. Yeah, if you can do that. That might be easier if you want to chat with him directly. You can set up some time with him and go through that. But thanks, Dan. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there for time saver for some people.
Of course. Well, seeing no more questions from our attendees, we'll let everybody go. I just want to say thank you again to Pierre and Amanda for sharing your expertise again with us today. It's all about mitigating risk for our employers here and making sure they're not taking on any unnecessary risk that they don't need to. So thank you for that. Of course, if anybody has any further questions or concerns, they can reach out to you guys personally. Pierre just put his information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
We're here.
I will say
as the partnership that we have with the chamber, I'm the liaison for the Greater Vernon Chamber with Peninsula. So you can reach out directly to me. I just put my email in the chat, or reach out to Dan and he can connect us, and be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Maybe explain a little more about what we do and how we can support you. And yeah. Look forward to hearing
some of the benefits of the partnership as well. So Pierre can kind of outline those, which you can take advantage of. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this was all about answering questions and sharing some knowledge. And but there is a partnership, as they said. So if you do end up doing business with Peninsula down the line, there's a discount for being a chamber member. So there's some options available for you. So that being said, thank you again to you both, and thank you to our attendees.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks everyone for joining.
And
thank you.
We will let everybody go and take on with the rest of their days and enjoy. Okay.
Have a great day.
Later,
enjoy
everyone.
the patios. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.